Welcome everybody to Waterbox Wednesday. We are here today and we're going to be doing feeding corals. I'm going to show you the different types of food that you can use for your corals. Also the difference between like broadcast feeding, target feeding, and which corals benefits the most. So Rich is actually out sick today, so it is just Jess today for me. We do have Jess on the comments, so if you do have any questions, put them in there. She'll be reading over those and sharing those, and we'll answer those as we go along. So, feeding corals. A lot of people don't really know which corals eat different types of food, and then also like certain ones can eat meatier foods versus only filter feeding. So we're going to go through some of that. First thing I did is I actually turned off the pump, turned off the power heads, and like skimmer and stuff like that. So the system is completely still. When you're spot feeding your corals, you don't want the flow taking the food away from them. You also don't want the fish to steal as much of the food from the corals. So I'm actually going to throw a little bit of food in for the fish to kind of make them a little bit happier as far as feeding. They're still going to probably fight the corals for some of the food, but it might minimize a little bit at least. Some krill for our big harlequin tusk that's in here, and well, the tank goes for it too. But this is just to get them fed. Hopefully they'll take less of our food from the corals. And then for feeding the actual corals, when we talk about broadcast feeding, it's usually putting in like a powdered food. We use Coral Max here, and this just goes into the water column, and the corals filter feed it out. So you've got like most of your zoanthids and gorgonians and Gonioporas and stuff just filter feed the water of smaller particles. And that's just like a little powdered stuff here. And this is different zooplanktons and phytoplanktons, mix of all kinds of stuff, just really small little, and then I'm just going to put some in here. Stir it up, and it doesn't need to be mixed with water. If you just put it in as powder, it's just going to float on the top and not going to go anywhere.
Smells good.
It smells delicious. There's some nice zooplankton in there for you. Now you can just dump this right into the water column when the pumps are on, and it'll just filter around the system. Corals will take it up that way, but we're actually going to take this and kind of center it over a lot of our corals because we do have a lot of Goniopora in here, which do like to feed a little bit heavier. And then we have a mix of mysis shrimp. We defrosted these. I used regular mysis and also like PE mysis, which is a larger, chunkier mysis shrimp. I defrosted those. Nice thing with these is you can spot feed your stuff, but also like in a turkey baster. Can take it and then spot feed the corals pretty easy. And then for some of your bigger stuff, we have like our elegant and our bubble coral, some of our things that can actually take bigger food. The anemones will be the same. We're going to be actually using some chunks of krill. And you could use chopped up squid, really anything, just bigger, meatier chunks for some of the bigger corals. So we'll feed some of them. What I'll probably do is start with some of the bigger stuff. We actually do have some dendros in here, and these are a non-photosynthetic coral, so they rely purely on being spot fed for any kind of nutrition. And the only way they're going to survive long term and also do any kind of growing is they do need to be spot fed quite a lot. So they're a high maintenance coral. They're not taking any of the energy from the light. And this one I might just be better off doing it with my hands.
I've got Rob in here. He's excited to watch you feed some corals.
Hi, Rob.
Shelly, JJ14G, his great little YouTube channel. Make sure to check him out.
So these ones I'm actually just putting some of these big chunks on here. They can take some pretty big food. You can also break them up a little bit smaller. But they will actually, and you'll see the fish trying to steal them. That's just what they're gonna do. If you've got like more hands, you can kind of have someone like, just push the fish away and try and keep them off of the corals while they eat, but you won't always win against them. Fish are hungry, they always wanna eat something. So these guys, just gonna put big pieces. Like I said, you can break them up even smaller. We have some smaller heads down here, but Dendros are really cool. They're really beautiful. But like I said, they're not photosynthetic, so they have got to have constant food source. Like I said, if those can actually stay on there and not get taken by the fish, he's going to be pretty happy. You can also take some of these bigger chunks and like go to the elegance coral. And with this one here, like you put it on their tentacles, don't like put it right to their mouth. Let them draw it in with those tentacles. And they'll take smaller stuff like mysis too, but they are capable of this bigger, meatier stuff. See, there's a clownfish just trying to take it. He can't even eat it, but fortunately this one's so big, there's plenty of room to put the food on their tentacles. And he'll take the rest onto his food there. So anemones, brain corals, and things like elegance, that kind of stuff, will take the bigger chunks of stuff. I'm gonna try and get it to these two, like this is a bleeding apple scalemia, and then we also have a lobo back there, and a tube anemone on this side, and those all can take some meatier diet as well. I'm gonna try and not knock anything over. These ones have smaller feeder tentacles, so sometimes it takes them a while to actually take that food down. But if you can keep the fish away from taking it, they will actually kind of pull that into their mouth and eat that. But our wrasse is choosing otherwise. One thing I've done in the past, you can take like a soda bottle or a 2-liter or something and like cut the bottom off of it and actually place it around the coral and then put the food down in there. Or once you put the food on it, cover it, and then the fish and crabs and stuff can't take the food off of the coral. So kind of at home when you have more time and ability to do so, that's not a bad method to keep the fish from taking all of their food. And if you have a lot of shrimp or anything in your tank, they will just steal it too. Let's see, I'm gonna try and get a little bit more back here. That guy.
Already said the corals are looking great.
Yeah, so last week we did add sand to this aquarium, and it's actually really brightened everything up. We did a little follow-up on it last week, and you'll actually notice we are getting a little bit of the normal diatoms that you get from a tank whenever you put sand or you're starting a tank. So you'll see a little bit of brown on there, completely normal in a new tank, or anytime you add new sand, just to get a little bit of a diatom. So that's going to be the main ones I feed big stuff to. There's a few more that we can go back and do. But I just want to show you all the different types that you can use. The next one we're going to do is like your mysis shrimp. This is good for like hammers and torches, Duncan corals, things that can eat meatier food, but they don't need as big of chunky stuff. And this makes it really easy if you have a turkey baster. Because like here, we have a whole Duncan colony, and I can just kind of let it fall onto the heads. If you can get it kind of dispersed around to a lot of them, it doesn't have to be 100%. And you'll see the fish eat quite well during this process.
Rich is watching.
Hi, Rich.
Poor guy's sick. All of you out there.
And our Naso is trying to eat everybody. Mango is trying to eat all the food from all the corals that we're putting in here. So we got a few.
Here. Just yes. What detergent do fish wash their clothes in?
What? I don't even know.
I'm gonna need to get the answer from him.
Like, that's been always the rule. You can't put a joke in the comments and not follow up with the answer. So we got like a torch coral here. We're gonna throw some in. Even throw some of the mysis into our elegance coral. Things like Gonioporas and chalices and stuff, they don't really eat the bigger chunks of stuff. They don't have the mouths for it. But hammers, torches, Duncans, all of that. Same thing with like leathers. They are gonna be pretty much filter feeders, which is what we use the other food for. So you actually have some little blastos.
Tide.
That was not good.
See, Miguel asked when the Waterbox cubes are back in stock.
Cubes are in stock. They're in stock and shipping. So we have a lot of orders going out right now. So if you have one that's been pending, it's going to be shipping any day now, and they are available to ship for new orders too. We got a Lobo with a little bit of mysis in here.
Any specific order that you should feed the corals in, or does it really matter?
Not really. I usually, if I'm gonna go and do everything at once, and a lot of times, like in your home aquarium, you may not decide to go and full out spot feed everything at one time like we're doing now. We're doing a little bit more of a higher concentration of feeding than you would want to, say, do regularly in the tank. But if I'm doing multiple coral types at once, I'm gonna do the bigger, chunkiest stuff because it takes that coral longer to close up around that food and actually digest it before we turn all the pumps on. Because once you turn these pumps on, anything that the coral hasn't grabbed onto then goes floating, and fish are going to eat it, or it's going to go into the filter system. So anything that's the bigger, the chunky stuff, the longer it's usually going to take the coral to eat it. It's like this is a Lobo here. He doesn't really have big tentacles out yet for feeding, but if you put some of the mysis right in each center of each head, he'll actually will start to take that in as well.
Travis is asking, how do you keep the nitrates down?
So nitrates in general is just going to be water changes, not overfeeding. Like I said, because we're doing like a full showcase of all the different types of coral feeding, we are feeding a bit more than we would at one time, or we would do regularly. Like generally, if you're going to say, okay, like once a week, let me go and pick a couple of the corals I'm going to spot feed. You know, if you're doing it actually like with mysis and krill and all that, for your general like broadcast feeding, you can do that more regularly. But having a good skimmer, good water flow, and keeping up regular water changes is going to be the key to just overall lower nitrates. So that's a lot of the spot feeding for those guys. You'll see like the fish start to get full and don't bother them as much, but they're going to get a nice big meal out of this. Especially tangs and stuff, they are just big pigs. Our beautiful Naso Mango is just taking everybody's mysis away from them.
Closing out.
David says, hey. Evan said, good evening, everyone.
Hey.
Ethan Pinch, who has a store in Idaho. Make sure to check him out.
Hey, Ethan. All right, so everyone's kind of feeding on those. We're gonna go to just our regular filter feeding, kind of zooplankton, zooplankton, and phyto. This is the Coral Max that we're using here. This is something that if just day to day, or just once or twice a week, you can just kind of put into the water column and let cycle around. The corals are gonna filter feed it. With this tank, we actually have a lot of Gonioporas, and Gonioporas tend to like heavier feeding. They're gonna do a lot better. And these are what we call Gonioporas, like this guy, these smaller ones here. We have quite a few in here. So with those, I'm gonna, now that the pumps are off, just gently let the turkey baster kind of bring some of that out. And it's gonna fall onto the Goniopora. If you went and did this with too much force, it's gonna cause the Goniopora to kind of close up, and then it won't take the food that you're giving it. You'll see, and it actually is going to like, each head is going to actually close up around some of the food. And this is small enough particles that they can actually eat it. If you tried to put mysis shrimp on like a Goniopora, it would do it no good. So we're just going to go through all of our little gonies. And like things like leather corals and zoanthids and stuff, they'll feed on this as well. But what we're going to do is kind of heavy feed the ones that need it the most. And then whenever the pumps kick on, all the excess is going to go to the regular filter feeding type of corals. We don't have to go with this and directly feed everything, because you'll use a whole lot more food and make a lot of waste. We're going to focus mostly on our Gonioporas because they do take the heaviest feeding. Anybody have any questions or anything? No? Just watching some coral feeding?
Pro, max out, baby.
Hey, Scott!
Yeah, we have David. He says he's going to be ordering his Marin 45.2 and can't wait to join the family.
Awesome. We look forward to having you in the Waterbox family. We've done quite a few builds on the Marin series, so once you get to going, check out some of the videos we've done, and it'll help them step by step right through it. So like I said, doing mostly all the Gonioporas. You'll see they're actually kind of closing up and taking in this food here. You can kind of, any of the corals will take this stuff up. I'll go down here a little bit. You can see, look at this bubble coral. It was this big open thing, and you actually see he's got individual like sections to him. You can never tell when they're all the way open. And he's actually closed up around some of the food that we gave him. We've got pink Goniopora here. Let's see, a red one. The leathers will take up what kind of comes off of these once we kick everything back on. And all your other corals will take this food too, and they'll catch it and use it. Chalices, globos, soft corals, it doesn't really matter. So this feeds everybody. Oh, stuff's gonna break. Then you actually have some Yumas, and they'll actually take this in too. You actually see stuff close up around it.
Said you're feeding a lot more than he does.
Yes, like I said, this is not the amount you would usually do at one time. But since we're trying to show all the different ways, we are going to do a little overfeeding, but we are always ready to compensate with an extra water change or just like a larger water change. This is due up anyway, so it's a good time right before you're going to have a water change scheduled in a day or two. If you want to do some extra heavy feeding, it's a great time to do it because you're going to already be doing a water change. And then just maybe do a few extra gallons on it. Change out like your filter socks, you know, clean the skimmer cup, make sure everything's running you know, really heavy. But most of this is going to be consumed, so it's not going to be a lot of extra waste in there. And you kind of can just let everything settle and eat for a little bit. You'll see, I managed to look over here, like that red lobo is actually closed up around a lot of the mysis and it's disappearing. And you'll see all the Gonioporas and stuff are kind of almost like wilted down as they're taking in the food. So everyone's happy and feeding. And it looks like our little dendros are working on their krill. So I usually leave it just sitting for a little bit and let everybody feed. Once you turn it back on, all the excess is going to kick up, fish are going to eat it, and then the zooplankton, coral max and stuff is going to cycle around to all the leathers and zoos and stuff.
Dylan asked if you ever make your phyto and coral max into a paste and then feed your corals that way.
You can. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little bit more of like a spot feed for things like, that'd probably work well for lobos and like mushrooms and stuff like that. The main reason I do any spot feeding in this tank, particularly with like a Coral Max type of mix, is for the Gonioporas because they are considered to be more difficult to keep, but the key to success with them is the heavier feeding, and they wouldn't take a paste very well. But it works great for like lobos, mushrooms, any of that. That would work really well. So you're just gonna let them sit for a little bit.
So how much time before you go ahead and turn on the pumps?
There's no set amount of time. I just kind of look and see if everyone's mostly done eating. You know, after 10, 15 minutes, kind of it's fair game, I feel like, just to kick everything back on. If some of the corals haven't taken all the mysis or krill, it's just gonna go to the fish for the most part. So you don't have to feed your fish after this. If you spot feed your corals, they're good. You can probably skip maybe a day or two. And having a lot of cleanup crew, crabs and stuff like that are gonna take care of the excess as well. So it's not really gonna do like any crazy spike to your water quality if you only do it on occasion. Like I said, we did more than we usually would on a regular basis. So we're just gonna let them all eat. And then, but everyone's, I mean, they're doing pretty good. I'd say another 10 minutes and you'd be safe to turn everything back on.
Any other questions? No?
Any questions from anybody? No?
Shelly asked if your filter's on. On your camera?
No, not right now.
All right, what if we're looking at the corals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's enjoying the corals.
I'll go in and out.
Yeah. But while we're looking at this, like I said, I'll kick this back on probably in like 10 minutes or so. We'll see if anyone has any questions, but we also want to mention that it is 16 days away from the family reunion. So it is almost here. It is only VIP passes left. So if you're already attending and you want to upgrade to the VIP pass, do check out our website. It's get you to the margarita reception, live food, music. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we do have raffles going on both days on site. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff being raffled off by all of our sponsors. And we've got the whole kind of speaker lineup, everything going. So you've got 16 days to get yourself a VIP and get on there. So thank you. We'll see you. No, we won't. We will be actually here next week on Wednesday, and we'll be recapping, I believe, our freshwater 6-foot peninsula that we did. And in about 10 minutes, we'll shut this tank, turn it back on, and we're good to go. So thank you.